Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Tuesday Night Fiction podcast. Tonight we'll be recapping chapter 4, First It Giveth. But I have a special announcement. Before we get into this episode, we have a winner of the giveaway. They have been reached out to and informed, so if you did not win, many apologies. However, I'm a big fan of giveaways, and since I have a 4th book coming out in probably about a month or two now, if you follow along, there will be more giveaways to come. So be very excited. Most likely, I will do another kind of thing where I give away all 4 books in the series, maybe plus another popular fantasy or fiction book. But yeah, follow along, become a member of the Civil Gang, and you will be the next one to win. So very excited to be continuing along. Before we start this episode, as always, this is a discussion episode of the Civilands series, which is what we go by week after week, with new audiobook fiction episodes from that series. There will be spoilers. Heads up. There will also be spoilers for Game of Thrones and Avengers, which I saw over the past, obviously, 2 weeks. I'm going to be getting into a couple thoughts I had on those. So if you have not seen either yet and you plan on it, either hit pause or X out. You don't have to do it yet because I'll probably be talking about it later in the episode. So stay with me until you get there. I'll give you another heads up when we get closer. For those of you who listen to Tuesday Night Fiction in podcast form, you can know that these discussion episodes are also on YouTube in video, so feel free to go there and subscribe if you want to see my precious face. I'm happy today despite wearing blue. I've been editing book 4 and it's been so good to get back into it. I actually am enjoying the editing process this time in a way that I haven't previously. I mean, I like being able to make the thing I'm working on better, obviously. Editing is, you learn a lot about yourself and a lot about your writing and how to make and how to improve, and improvement is always cool. But this one, I guess maybe because I was waiting for like 4 months while my editor was in the pregnancy/giving birth process, it was kind of on hold, and then she sent it back, and then she sent back her updates, which were in like the second round right now, which is the second of 3, and she was pretty blown away by the changes after the first round, and I was very, very happy about that. This book is going to kick so much ass, you don't even understand. I got through chapter 1 and I was already like on my high horse, and now I'm in like a couple days like through the changes for like chapter 9 or 10. I've been obsessed with it. I haven't stopped over the past couple days. And every time I do have to stop, it's because I have to. I mean, that's the crazy thing, is that I could keep going. I would keep going forever, but it's usually something that takes me away from it rather than me like being tired of it or mentally drained. So it's just, I mean, I'm so proud of this book. I can't even begin to explain how awesome it is to feel that way. So join now and get on the train before it's too late, because this book is going to kick some fucking ass, let me tell you. Okay, so what I'm up to, that's basically been it. Just been editing, working through, continuing along with the podcast. As always, if you haven't liked, shared, or subscribed the podcast yet on social media or on whatever podcatcher or wherever, please do so. It always helps. And we will get to keep growing and sharing this community as well. If you are tired of waiting, if you do like what you're hearing so far in terms of the chapters, and you don't want to wait for the next episode to come out 2 weeks later, then go ahead and buy the books. The books are on Amazon. They're on a couple other stores in terms of for the ebook versions. But Amazon, you can get yourself paperbacks. 1 to 3 are available now. Book 4 will be around probably towards the end of June, and then book 5 will be coming next, probably in 2019, because it's the last book in the series, and I'm going to kick so much ass in it, you can't even begin to understand. I've already brainstormed. I already know where. I mean, I've known where it's going for a while, but I've already brainstormed, and I've already started brainstorming. I mean, and it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful spectacle, the likes of which have never been rivaled in the history of man. And particularly, we're going to talk about that in the context of a couple things that I've been experiencing over the past couple days. Okay, so let's get into a recap real quick. So for chapter 4, a couple things that happened. So Dominic, Jeannie, and Hansa found their way into Haran as they, before I keep going, again, spoiler alert. I just can never be too sure if anyone maybe forgets that this is about talking about an episode that just happened. So if you haven't got there, heads up. Anyway, so Jeannie, Hansa, and Dominic found their way into Haran, which is now basically overrun by the Keegan gang. Dominic went through the town to try to scout it out before, because of any of them, they wouldn't know who he is, especially since they were after Jeannie and her family at first. So Dominic goes through the town, he scouts it out, he kind of finds an opportunity to usher the kids into the town, and it doesn't go over so well. So at the saloon that he's at, he gets everybody pretty drunk. He meets a guy named Jesse Billings, who is a bastard, not literally, but he's just a bastard. And Jesse gives him kind of a hard time, and when he finds out, or when he's stumbling out of the saloon, kind of stumbles upon them, there's a little magic show, and that Dominic is convinced by this drunk to put on, and it doesn't turn out so well. Not for Jesse Billings. Jesse Billings gets a knife to the face, and regrettably so. So Dominic is this is actually the funny thing. So I think I talked about this in one of the previous episodes, and this is the cool. I mean, it's hard in the beginning. I'll tell you what, it's hard in the beginning of this podcast when you're going through the first couple chapters to talk very deeply about many things, and I struggle even only on episode 4 or chapter 4. Sorry. To kind of know what to say and what not to say so early, because a lot of things are still building. But I think I talked earlier in the podcast, or in one of the previous episodes, about struggling to come up with specific storylines and creative block. Dominic is the character that I struggled the most with creative block, and this scene in particular was my lightning moment, right? So I remember I was probably describing that one day I was in the car on the way to work, and I had been waiting. I had been just sitting on it for weeks, like not knowing how to make Dominic's character make sense, like where he came from and who he is and why he's there and whatever. And this is what I got. So Dominic used to be a member of a gang. So gangs were prevalent in the Murrieta territory historically for a while, both for safety, or mainly for safety and for community. And that was like the main source of community in the territory. And while Dominic was struggling at some of his hardest times when he first entered, it ended up being his only option. The gang life ended up getting a little dark for him. And as he mentions, I think in one of the previous chapters, he was asked to kill. He did so. So that ended up being too much for him. He wasn't able to accept that anymore. And that conflict obviously comes up with him right here. As you can see at the end of this chapter, or at the beginning of this chapter, when he's forced, or when he feels like he's forced to take Jesse out because of the threat he's presenting to them. It eats him. It eats at him immediately, even as annoying as Jesse is and as much of a bastard. I'm going to keep using that word. It's a funny word. It's a Game of Thrones word. Like, I don't know that... maybe I might have known that bastard meant, like, that you're the product of an affair, but I might not have known that before Game of Thrones, and it's a funnier word now for some reason. Anyway. So he kills the bastard, and rolls him up and takes him off, and it ends up being pretty intense. Obviously, we get to see a little bit of Dominic's tricks, We get to see kind of more of the relationship between Dominic, Hansa, and Jeannie. A little. He sees himself obviously as like the leader, the father figure to them. Since both of them, neither of them have a father anymore, and he kind of he takes things into his own hands, both in terms of how they proceed and the choices that end up being made. And the conflict between them kind of rises with Hansa and Jeannie at times also both feeling like they're not being heard. And we'll see that more as we go, but that started kind of right here in this scene in particular. In particular, wondering about, while they have to wait for him, scouting out the place, how they get in and how they're going to get out. And he kind of keeps it mostly to himself. He's the schemer. He's the illusionist. He's used to running the show. And funny enough, and that's it. I'm going to get into that right now. So one of the most interesting things for me when it's come to writing is that all of the characters, and not every trait about them, but all of the characters have traits that I've either seen in myself, struggled with myself, and wanted to explore more. And for Dominic, it's funny because this isn't something that I even realized until like probably the past month or two. And I think it's like a Higgs boson test or something. I don't remember. Personality test. And little did I know that like my outcome based on the answers said that I was extroverted, which was very strange. But they basically, like, you know how they sum it up in the 4 letters, and of the overall summary of the 4 letters said that I was a commander, which is like, sounds brutal. It makes me sound like a war dictator or something. But it makes sense in a way, because I'm very used to, I've talked about it a lot with friends and family, and if I was given the opportunity to write something someone else wanted me to write, I don't know that I would take it. So like, I love to write. I love being creative. I love telling stories, but I don't know that I've ever jumped at the opportunity to tell someone else's story. And I don't know that I would. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. I know last week I talked half-heartedly a little bit about spin-offs, but I think that's one of the reasons why spin-offs struggle so much, is it's hard to feel responsibility, I guess, or pride, or the same degree of pride in someone else's story as your own. And so for me, that commander role has taken form in that way. And that's why I like this journey the most. I get to do every part of it. The places where I need help, you have to seek out help. Like editing is one example of places where you just can't do it all on your own. You have to use other people's expertise. And you have to be aware of how to do that. Another example was the trailer. So if you go on YouTube, you can find the trailer for the Civilands series. It's a live action trailer, which is not something that I think too many authors do, but it's just something I was interested in doing. And again, there it was like seeking out the help of friends and family who were really big into videography or acting. So we sought out a voice actor, a videographer, and an actress who plays the role of Jeannie. And but overall, the reason I think why I've been so drawn to this whole experience as a whole is because it allows me to have control kind of over everything. And I think that's a problem for me in some ways, and in some ways a strength. But that's kind of one thing that I explored through Dominic. Again, too, when it comes to working in groups, it's like you have to be able to work in groups, but I find that when it comes to me being in a leadership position, it's much harder if it's not something I'm heavily invested in. Like if it's not a topic that I'm heavily invested in, I have a much harder time feeling like I'm in control, even if I am. Like, you could put me the title of CEO. If I was CEO of a paper company, I just don't think I would get it, because I don't really use paper a ton. You know, I mean, like, I'm mostly, if I'm reading something, it's mostly on my phone. It's ironic because I'm an author and I want you to buy my books. But yeah, so like, but if you put me in charge of directing my trailer, I mean, that was one of the best experiences of my life. I mean, I got to see people enacting my vision, and it was easy. It was so easy to coordinate them in a way that everybody enjoyed, because particularly in this field, I mean, if you find an actress or a director or a person who can work a camera, those are mostly people who are doing creative things that they like, so they can get into it if you can guide them the right way. And I think that's overall what I'm saying. With the proper guidance, a passion is a passion. But taking control yourself is probably pretty hard when it comes to it not being something that you create yourself. And that's been a thing for me. Anyway, long-winded kind of journey into who Dominic is. He struggles with his two conflicts, basically, so far in the story, have been spreading the knowledge and not being too mysterious, and also, obviously, like we've seen here, with making the tough decision to do what you got to do, if you know what I mean. Whack somebody if they need to be whacked. Anyway, that was part one. Then it went on into part two. So Laterra and Elon starting to get to know each other. Laterra of the Vahani and Elon of the Tokali. They're going south towards the Tokali hold. And starting to bud. A friendship is starting to bud. You know, they're starting to get a little closer. Elon's helping her out along the way with getting her people south. And yeah, carrying along. Then we bounce back to Aron, and Dominic is maneuvering through the town trying to get some more information on the Keegans. He first runs into Charles Langston, who is a bit of an oddball, a lot of an oddball. Charles Langston basically fashioned himself mayor of Aron, not elected. It's not a title that necessarily means anything, but he's the guy that's kind of a know-it-all and pretty self-important. Pretty damn self-important. And he, as Dominic finds out, is focused on the Keegans. So he's in on the Keegan plan. He's been bought and sold. Well, at least he's been sold the vision, and he thinks that the people of Aron should follow the Keegans. And because he thinks he's an authority figure, he thinks he can tell them to do that. So he's not really to be trusted. At least that's what Dominic figures out along the way. Charles also tells Dominic a different story about what happened at the Morell home. So Charles was told by the Keegans, and then he conveyed to Dominic that the Morells fired on the Keegans first. Obviously, not the story that Jeannie told Dominic. So now we have conflicting stories. So Dominic does not bring that up with Charles, because he knows that it's going to be hard to trust this guy. Not sure if he wants to make his presence known. Charles already has a problem with some other members in town, particularly the Kennedale sisters, who he doesn't trust for one reason or another. Charles is kind of a dimwit, but Dominic knows that, and he takes the information that he can get and he moves along. On the way home, though, he overhears the Kennedale sisters being attacked by one of the members of the Keegan gang in front of their home. By the time he gets over there, the guy is gone, but he helps them get their stuff back to get themselves back together. Kennedale sisters are an interesting bunch. Are an interesting couple, sorry. And by couple, I mean they're sisters, not they're a couple. But they're a couple interesting characters who we find out are very good friends of Dominic's. But when Dominic asks them about why Charles might not trust them, we find out that maybe they are hiding something. And that's kind of where we leave off there. We don't find out what it is, but Dominic can see into them, into their response. He reads into their response, basically, that something is not right. Finally, and this was a pretty interesting chapter. I had a lot of fun making this chapter, first of all. I kind of worried. I worried a lot, actually, with probably the podcast even more than the books of the follow-up dilemma. And I talked about this, I think, before. It's just not easy to be confident that you can do it again, right? Even on the fourth one, the fourth chapter episode, the 7th episode, you kind of worry that it's gonna get stale, or it's gonna be hard to carry on. It's gonna be hard to keep the music interesting, or it's gonna be hard to keep the story going in an exciting way. Or, well, I mean, the story is already written, but it's gonna be hard to make it sound as exciting, basically, as before, to use new effects, or maybe I should use effects the entire episode and just make it insane. But I really like the way this one came out, especially in this scene. So at the end, Latera finds out from her brother through the eagle that he called earlier, I think in either chapter 2 or 3, that the Keegans are coming for them, but also that they were betrayed, or their father, Arcuda, was betrayed by his councilman. He was killed by the councilman, and that Hansa escaped. So Latera finally figures out the truth, but kind of too late, honestly. She figures out the truth. Hansa requests she stay calm because she's still got to guide her people south. And as she's storming back to the camp, unable to stay calm, I mean, you find out that your brother, who you thought was dead, is alive, and your father was betrayed. As she's storming back, it all comes to a head. So the crows that we saw at William's wedding are now come back into view overhead. So the crows were sent from the Great Fortress. So the Great Fortress is the northernmost base, essentially, of the Vahani. There are 3 main bases of the Vahani. They have the Riverlands, which is we're in the north here, but it's the furthest south in the north. We have the Mountainlands camp, which is where her uncle Aron is the chieftain. And we have the Great Fortress, which is where the Grand Chieftain lives. I don't know if we've met him yet. His name is Varric, though. Grand Chieftain Varric. So we have this flyover. We have another flyover, except this time, these are Vahani. They can understand the birds. They hear messages in the birds. And the birds came specifically from the Great Fortress with messages of varying kindness, let's say. So towards the Vahani, towards the people of the Vahani of the Riverlands, we hear good things. We hear messages to carry on and to keep going and to be brave and hopefully unite. Hopefully the union works. The chieftains aren't so happy, though. The chieftains are not happy with the councilmen who have left without consoling them first, or seeking out their approval first. So just like Arcuda said in the beginning, the chieftains, the Grand Chieftain, and the chieftains and the councilmen of the northern camps were not happy with the actions of the councilmen to leave so soon. Obviously, they do not know about the betrayal. They don't know that the chieftain, the Grand Chieftain, and the councilmen of the north do not know about the betrayal of Chieftain Arcuda. However, they're still pretty upset that a decision was made to go south without approval. Especially to go south to another tribe or another clan that they have not historically been friendly with. So overall, Latera feels a little bit better about this. She feels a little like she's got some support on her side. Like I said, although they don't know that the betrayal took place, at least the councilmen will kind of get the message sent that what they did was wrong. What they did was half of what they did was wrong. And this flyby is a distraction, however. In the flyby, there's an attack. So the Keegans have come for Walter. Walter Keegan, who was the Vahani hostage, has now been taken. The Keegans attacked the camp. They did not kill anyone at the camp. They burned tents. They burned tents with supplies in particular, and they took Walter. And the chaos of the birds and the horses prevented them from really doing anything about it. But that was honestly one of the funnest, the probably funnest effects scene to do for me so far. So there's a part where Latera gets attacked by a horse, or not attacked, but almost stampeded by a horse. So kind of mixing the sound effects of men, horses, the stampede sounds, the crows. It was a really, really cool thing to do. And it came together, I think, really well. You could let me know about that. As always, like I've said before in previous episodes, like any feedback would be greatly appreciated. I've already gotten a ton, and it's been interesting. So that's pretty much the recap. So I'll go into, let me say some of the feedback that I've gotten. So the interesting thing here, and I kind of wondered why there haven't been more of these audiobooks with music in them, because I love it. I mean, for me, I'm not a huge reader, so being able to kind of get in the mood allowing the music to get you in the mood of the book is pretty cool. However, at the same time, I can understand that it probably can, for a reader, for a person who is specifically into reading, it can be hard to focus on just hearing someone's voice and absorb the story to the same extent, right? So the feedback I've mostly gotten from non-readers has been fantastic. And I'm so grateful for that. For everyone who has reached out, that's been amazing. It's been it's made my decision to start doing this such a good one. I'm so appreciative of that. And then also from the readers, you're in luck because it's in book form. And but yeah, obviously for some, like I said, for some people, for readers in particular, like I was saying, it's a little bit harder. And I think that's why people who are readers tend to say that the movie is not as good as the book. And for the most part, I agree. The movie usually isn't as good as the book, but it is a different experience. So different avenues for everyone, but at least we have both, right? And I think that the music has been good from what I've heard, and enjoyable. And yeah, so hopefully you've enjoyed what you heard so far. I'm not going to go too much more into my story, into the story, because again, we're still kind of early. That these discussions will definitely become way more story heavy as we go, but the potential for me to say spoilers is very high the more I talk about it. So I would rather be kind of gentle about the information I present. So that's pretty much it for first It Giveth so far. I think I'll say that the name of the chapter came about mostly because I think in a lot of ways, in these stories, I'm the it giving. I giveth and then I taketh away from these characters. There's a lot of hardship that they go through as soon as something good happens. So in this chapter in particular, it happens in a couple of ways, particularly with Walter Keegan being the hostage and then being taken away, and a lot gets taken away because in order to get, you need to have not. In order to have, you need to have not first. So yeah, that's going to be a theme as we go, and hopefully you've enjoyed what you heard so far. Now I want to get into some interesting things. So again, spoiler alert. If I haven't said it enough, and again, I'll say it in every episode. I don't mean to be harsh about it. but we are going to talk about Game of Thrones and Endgame. What's my opinion on those things, you might ask? Okay. Let's start with Endgame. I want to be positive because I can be very critical of a lot of things, especially Marvel. And historically, I haven't liked many of the Marvel. I'm just not really a superhero guy. I think one of my favorites superhero movies was The Dark Knight, and I know that the reason why I lean towards that one more than some of the real superhero movies is like superhero movies where they have abilities, is that it is more realistic, and that tends to lead to a more coherent story where you don't have to look past kind of inconsistencies. Some of the inconsistencies I've seen in the past, I guess, with Marvel, like one that I always bring up is, I think it was the Winter Soldier Captain America, where like the theme of the movie is that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been infiltrated. And my understanding is that S.H.I.E.L.D. is the organization that kind of oversees the Avengers. So I don't understand why the Avengers don't then come and like help with the situation. You'd think that would be a problem for them all. Sometimes things like that take me out of the movie. But then there's been movies where I didn't think about it really much at all. Like one of my favorite Marvel movies so far was Doctor Strange. I mean, the visuals in that movie, I saw it in 3D IMAX. My car actually got hit while parked that night by someone who was in the group that I was with, who I hadn't met yet, or who I hadn't really known before I saw the movie. But that's another story. Anyway, but the visuals in 3D IMAX for Doctor Strange were, I mean, just ridiculous. It was like just an amazing kaleidoscope, literally the whole movie, and that was enough for me. It allowed me to just shut my mind off and not think about the story at all. And I don't know if I don't know if the story made sense or it didn't. I really didn't pay attention because my eyes were just transfixed on this movie. But that one was good. Yeah, that's really the only one. I liked Infinity War as well. I liked that the ending kind of was surprising to me. I didn't expect, obviously, half of the people to die. And I was worried about this one for the following reasons. So, there's a gauntlet, and it's got all sorts of stones on it. It's got a reality stone and a time stone. And when you have the ability to control time and reality, it kind of makes the movie hard to make, in my opinion, because it's like you could do almost anything, and keeping it coherent at that point seems almost impossible. And here's why. So, time travel is a lie. That's what I learned from Endgame. And although there were plot or story inconsistencies, I didn't really care because, to be honest, it was so bold what they did that I was just more impressed than anything. People don't usually take risks at all. And I came out of it not upset, even though there were like glaring holes. I mean, glaring. And it was also entertaining. It's a huge movie. You've probably seen it. I don't know why I'm acting like anyone hasn't seen it. Everyone's probably seen this movie. But yeah, so I want to talk about what it made me think about. And I'm not going to present this about the fact that it's a plot. I'm not presenting it as a plot hole to put it down. I'm presenting it as a plot hole because it made me realize that every movie about time travel makes no sense. And let me first also say that I'm not an expert on quantum physics, okay? But neither are the people who made this movie, and neither are you. So don't tell me. So you could obviously criticize what I'm about to say, and if I'm completely wrong, just tell me. But I think it's interesting to talk about, and I want to talk about it. So let me present to you a scenario. Let's say you're in your room and it's 1:00 p.m., right? Over the next 5 minutes, you spend that time building a time machine. At 1:05, you succeed at building the time machine. For the next 5 minutes, you celebrate because, shit, you made the first time machine ever, right? That's awesome. Way to go. Congratulations. Then at the 10th minute, you decide you're going to go back in time to when you first built the time machine. Or not even when you first built it, when you first started building it at 1 p.m., right? So now you go back in time to the same place. You're going back to your room. And now there are 2 of you in your room, right? But there weren't 2 of you in your room before. And there couldn't have been. At some point in the real past, there had to have been one of you in your room because time travel did not exist yet. So you cannot possibly go back to the same timeline, but it would have to be another dimension. That's the only explanation. And it could be a dimension that looks exactly like the past, sure. But that past still happened the way it did. There were still one of you in your room in the past, and there always will have been. So it cannot possibly be the same timeline that you're on when you go back. Now, let me relate it to the movie. So in the movie, when the Hulk is talking to the shaman, and she says, if you do this, you're just going to create a parallel timeline. That's correct. She was right. You will. But when the Hulk says, not if we bring the stones back. If we bring the stones back, this will all be fixed. That's bullshit. That's not possible. Hulk, half Hulk, not like the full Hulk, but a half for some reason. I really wonder why they did that. I don't understand what the purpose of that was. I guess just so that he could speak normally or something. That was kind of weird. But yeah, so they said that if you bring the stones back, and here's why that doesn't make any sense, and here's another hole that, again, I'm not complaining about. I'm just saying it. I'm just acknowledging it. Is that so they go back, they get the stones, but Thanos also figures out what they're doing, and he uses their technology to come forward in time to where they are, which is 5 years after Infinity War, right? Or however many years after, some amount of time after, I don't remember. And so he comes to where they are after Infinity War, and he dies. So if they were on the same timeline, let's get this clear. If they were really on the same timeline, then Thanos before Infinity War, in fact, Thanos before Infinity War and before Guardians of the Galaxy, because Gamora at that point didn't even know who the Guardians of the Galaxy were. So Thanos and Gamora of pre-Guardians of the Galaxy come forward to the future, and Thanos dies. So if it's the same timeline, then Thanos never even lived out the events of Infinity War. He would have been dead. Because he died realistically before Infinity War even happened. And then Gamora is also, I mean, from what we know, still in the future, but she would have never lived out, she would have never been in the Guardians of the Galaxy either. The other problem there is that the people of Guardians of the Galaxy know who she is. So if she was never in the past, they shouldn't know who she is. In fact, no one should know who Thanos is either. If it's the same timeline, because on that timeline, those people were never there. Trippy. Really trippy. But again, it's challenging to write those kind of things. I get that. It's very, very hard. It makes little to no sense, even when you explain it simply. And I like that it got me thinking about it. Honestly. Excuse me. I love that it got me thinking about it, because I had endless conversations with my friends about the fact that time travel is not possible, and it's not. You can go to a different dimension, but you cannot go back into the real past. to the past that actually happened. Now, who are you? Let me explain. If you go back, again, so we got to 1:10 p.m. We went back to 1 p.m. At 1 p.m., at this 1 p.m. world, there were two of us. What you've done is created a new dimension. You have not gone back in time. We established that. I'm right. Live with it. Or respond and tell me why I'm wrong. You won't. And if you do, I respect you. But you won't. So, when you meet this new you, let's say that you spend the next 5 minutes building your time machine again with the new you. When you travel again, can you go back to your old world? The answer is still no. The answer is still no. Because once again, you will just be going to another dimension. The world that you were in will carry on without you. But you can only create new dimensions. That explanation might not have been as good as the first one, but if you think about it hard, it's true. My brain already hurts, so I'm not going to get too into it. But if anyone would like to discuss this with me, feel free to reach out. Send it on my contact form, send me a text if you know me, or just hit me up on social media. Tell me why you think I'm wrong, and I'll tell you why I think you're wrong. But it's really interesting. I mean, it kind of, when I say time travel, right, I'm using the popular movie definition of it. And I'm saying that the popular movie definition of it is not possible. That's my contention. And Infinity War or Endgame helped me think about that. Infinity War never happened. Sorry to say it, guys. You're mistaken if you think you went and saw it. It never happened. How am I talking about it? I don't even know, because it never happened. It's kind of weird, but it's the truth. Anyway, final point, and then we will wrap up. I want to talk about Game of Thrones. I'm going to try to be positive and negative here, because I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. Huge. Very big. And I don't think these last episodes have been bad. I just think that it's interesting to see the continuation of such clunky fight scenes. And as for the story, I think the story has been it's been a pretty milquetoast ending, right? I don't think it's been a bad ending. I think a lot of it makes sense. There's more explanations that I wanted, especially in terms of like Bran. Bran is confusing to me. There's so much about his storyline that it just feels like is just convenient. I mean, there's so much deus ex machina in this story that it's like literally when I say the God in the machine, it's like literally God, apparently. Like that's literally God gives them convenient help at different times. And there's nothing wrong with having a God with abilities or utilizing a God's abilities or any of that. But they're not consistent, whatsoever. Like, Melisandre can basically do anything that they want her to. Like, she's literally just God. Like, any way we need Melisandre to help us from the Night King, she'll do it. And I think, to me, Deus Ex Machina is one of the most annoying plot conveniences there is. Anytime I see it, it's a bother. And again, not saying that you can't have a woman given abilities by a god. That's not what I'm saying. I would be a hypocrite if I was saying that. But because obviously in my stories, characters are given abilities. It's a fantasy story. Naturally, people are going to be given abilities, and you have to assume if it's not an atheistic book that some god is doing it, I guess. But overall, just keep it consistent. You know, I don't get why Bran Stark, if you're not going to give me a full backstory, like people said that Bran Stark might be the Night King, or that Bran Stark comes from Bran the Builder, or whatever. Like, give me some reason why him, other than he fell from a tower, and maybe it was explained, maybe I missed it, but it's like, I feel like there's so much of that. I feel like there's so many things that I missed. Maybe the story's just too big, it's just gotten away from them. But that's one thing the only real thing that bothers me about the plot itself is that. I think in terms of the one other thing that's bothered me is the clunkiness, like I said. Like, so first of all, I like the way Tormund leaves. I like the way Tormund leaves the story. I think it made sense. I don't even think that killing the Night King now was a bad move after episode 3. I don't think that having Arya killing her was a bad move. I predicted that before the 3rd episode happened. I think that when they're showing her throwing daggers at a target, throwing specifically dragonglass daggers at a target and launching arrows at a target, it's not foreshadowing to have that as a symbol of her fighting in a war. That's an assassin move. That's what she's practicing. And even though she didn't use that assassin move for the kill, which I was kind of confused about, she still was the one to kill him. I mean, she was practicing being tactical, and then she ended up being tactical. So that made sense to me. I thought the fight was cool. I mean, the tension at the beginning of the fight was brutal. I mean, just insane. Like, you literally couldn't have had my hair standing on end more. It was amazing. And the first 2 episodes, they built up to it. There wasn't much there in the first 2 episodes, but whatever. I get it that you want to stall a little bit. It makes sense. There were some things like Brienne becoming a knight, which I didn't think was cool at first, but I've been kind of rewatching some of the old episodes, and they always ask her if she's a knight. I didn't even realize that they always asked her that until I rewatched. So that's cool. I thought that the Dany and Jon thing, it could have been its own season. I mean, it could have had a full season of that, and it just did not get enough time. So I was kind of upset with that. But yeah, so let me get into the clunkiness. I've directed 1 trailer. I'm not a video master. I'm not, even if I start doing more video stuff, I will mostly I'm the storyteller. I would mostly defer to like a camera people or a director specifically for how shots work. But I will tell you this, when it comes to the shots and the fight scenes, you don't need to put Jon Snow in a position where he's literally surrounded by thousands of zombies all rushing at him all at the same time. You don't need to do that if you want him to survive it. Why do that? Because what they do is that they leave him there, and you have all these people rushing at him, all these zombies rushing at him, and then they cut away. And then 2 or 3 minutes later, they cut back, and he's fighting off like 1 or 2 stragglers. It's like, did he kill all of them? And he was alone. So it's just really... A lot of it's really convenient. I mean, just, it's not even that it's convenient. It's just that it looks poorly planned because, again, there's no obligation to put him in an impossible situation like that. And then when it happens again, where the Night King raises the dead again, and everyone in the tower is in the same position. All these zombies are being raised that were living before. So there's like just a mass of them now. And there's only X number of people left alive that I can count on my hand. And they all live? I mean, Sam Tarly lives? Come on. Like, I mean, he's literally surrounded by zombies. you had to kill. I mean, and the fact that they, like, in this most recent episode, they had it where he's done from the story. I mean, he left with his woman. His time in the story is over. So they did nothing with him after having him survive. He didn't present any new information or anything. He should be dead as hell. Like, he should be super dead. I mean, there's no explanation for him surviving that fight. He also survives the fight at, like, when those wildlings stormed the wall. I mean, this dude is the luckiest dude alive. He doesn't have any fighting experience, and he's known to be a wimp, and he survives, like, the two of the biggest fights the show has. I mean, it's just weird. So there's a lot of that, a lot of clunky, like, coordination of scenes, like I said. And then in the newest episode, like, the two that bothered me in episode 4 were just, I mean, the dragon going down first, which is just, how do you sneak up on a fleet of ships and 2 dragons with a fleet of ships? It doesn't make any sense to me. And even if you want to tell me that they were hiding behind the island, fine. But then the dragon, all the dragon needs to do, so 1 dragon gets shot down, right? By 3 perfect arrows in a row. Incredible. Anyway, 1 gets shot down. I can look past the impracticality of that. I can look past that. Sometimes people do amazing things, right? So you could maybe shoot the arrow and get 3 lucky shots, whatever. It's not that surprising. But then Dany turns around and goes straight at the boats, which are next to an island that's taller than the boats, because they had to be in order to sneak up. The island was the only explanation for them sneaking up. So all Dany needed to do, seems like to me, fly around the island. It's not a big island. You could see the other side of it. Fly around it, use it for cover, flank the fuckers, burn them all alive. End of fight. End of Greyjoy, or whatever the hell his name is. They're all dead. No one on the boats has to die. End of story. But that wouldn't have resulted in one of the dragons dying. Well, it could have still. It wouldn't have resulted in Missandei getting captured. So we're going to ignore that. We're going to make it kind of ridiculous and just have this one person get captured. Everyone else washes up on shore, all alive, mostly, except the peasants, the peasant fighters who mean nothing. And then, so we conveniently allow Missandei to be captured. And then we have the scene in front of the castle. In front of King's Landing. Where Missandei is captured. And Tyrion goes to negotiate with the demon man who brings back the mountain. And what happens? They negotiate. The King's Landing man plays the reverse card in Uno. The negotiations fail. Tyrion goes up to the castle and pleads, "Cersei, why must we kill people? Why must we let people die, Cersei?" Meanwhile, Cersei has a string of people with arrows. She has visually it looked like between 5 and 10 of those large things that take down dragons, those large bolt shooting things, the massive crossbow things. And assuming an army, because they already said her army was as big as Jon and Dany's army, what they had left of it. So, and Cersei's army is certainly in King's Landing. Otherwise, where would they be? They must be there, prepared to defend it. And here's Dany with a few Unsullied. Maybe there were 50 there. Maybe. Her dragon in the background. And her just standing there. And Cersei doesn't kill them. Cersei kills the wench. No offense to Missandei. But honestly, they killed off a character that wasn't that important. And they killed her and then let Dany walk off with her dragon, with Tyrion, with her Unsullied. Allowed her to go and regroup because we need a good fight. You know, why didn't Dany just hide behind a cliff? She could have watched. We didn't need her there. Why was she there? And why didn't Cersei kill her? I don't get it. I really don't get it. And honestly, I've heard that the books are better. The books, certainly, it's such a complex story that I'm sure it's hard to show on TV. I'm sure there's so much that's difficult to depict on TV. They've done a fantastic job with the story. Just an amazing job. And I'm not mad about the plot. Like I said, there's things I don't get. There was things I don't get, though, that they did talk about, but just it's such a big story that sometimes you just miss stuff. So when it comes to the plot things, I kind of look past that, and I thought that the Long Night episode, I didn't think it was that bad. A lot of people didn't like it, but I like, again, the fighting was weak. Another thing that I just remembered about the fighting was the crypt. Like, how in God's name do Tyrion and Sansa and Varys, they just hide in a corner? Like, that's how they get away? Everyone else down there is getting slaughtered? That's how they get away? There weren't that many people down there to begin with. So if the other people got slaughtered, I don't know how much time they would have that they could just hide in a corner. Riddle me that. That was weird. Also, like, the military strategy. I mean, when they send the Dothraki off, like, in the beginning, it's an awesome looking scene. It's just like, why? Why do that? It didn't seem to help. There's no way to know that it helped, and now they're on enemy lines, able to be raised from the dead and fight you. So it's like, seemed kind of silly. But overall, I don't hate it. I mean, there's things that, like I said, some people wanted more of the book prophecies. Some people wanted more that they haven't gotten. I think, like I said, I think it's just hard to kind of reveal everything all at once in 6 episodes. I wish it would have been 10. I mean, if it would have been 10, you could have had way more of the Jon and Dany thing play out, and it wouldn't feel rushed. I mean, it just feels like at this point, there's 2 episodes left. It has to be rushed. It's the only way I could imagine it happening. But I'm going to stop for now. Like I've said to some other people, you just got to give it time. You just got to see what happens, and if it ends good, it ends good. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Game of Thrones has been phenomenal up to this point. So, and I never would have thought that I'd be talking down on Game of Thrones and talking up on Infinity and on the Avengers, on anything from the Avengers. It's weird, but I like both of them, and that's the only reason why I'm talking about them. And I mean, I know I've talked about how things that you don't like end up inspiring you, but I don't really like dwelling on those too much and spewing negative energy too much about those things. I do spew it because I feel like you learn from it. At least for me as a writer, I learn from it. I learned things I didn't want to do. Actually, before I go, one of the last things I'll mention is that I think a year or two ago, somewhere along the way of writing, I think it was on either the 3rd or 2nd book, and I wanted to see how Game of Thrones ended before I finished the series, because I'd seen a couple series endings. I mean, I'd seen how Breaking Bad ended and how a couple other shows that I was really into came to a close, but I wanted to get a little more background on endings, and I think so far Game of Thrones has probably taught me more that I am not crazy about than things that I am crazy about. As opposed to Breaking Bad, where one of my friends said it felt like it was ending, right? It didn't feel like there's no way this can be the end. It felt like the end was coming. And I think that is what I'll be shooting for with book 5. But for now, thanks so much for listening in. We're almost at a full hour here. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the support. It's so much fun coming on here and talking. Honestly, I look forward to it every week. And just ramble. Honestly, it's really good. It's a really good time. And I know some people say that nobody's having a better time than them, but nobody's having a better time than the civilians over here. To the bold alone. I look forward to talking to you again next week, or 2 weeks from now. But next week we'll have a new episode, Chapter 5. It's going to be a doozy. And as always, this has been Nicholas Austin, Tuesday Night Fiction. Look forward to Chapter 5 next week. Look forward to Book 4, Cryptic Kingdom, coming out in June. And thank you. Thank you as always for listening in. I'll say again before I head out, books are on Amazon. If you've read the books, if you enjoy the books, please review them. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe to it. Subscribe to me on YouTube, even if you're already subscribed somewhere else. Always like to see comments and to get feedback, so feel free to send your contact form my way. Reach out to me on social media, direct message me, slide into my DMs, do whatever you want. And I will talk to you again next week. Have a good night. Happy Tuesday.